Howdy, I'm Jammer. Well, as you can clearly tell from my ensemble, we will be discussing Green Lantern. And granted, I'm a tad more flamboyant than I was in the last Green Lantern video, but that's okay, because again, the Green Lantern run by Geoff Johns of the New 52 can get, well, how you say, really epic and wild and crazy. So naturally, I decided to do a little bit more. And before you ask a question, before you ask the question, yes, this is a women's blouse. And no, it's not a women's blouse, it's my blouse. If you don't like it, go away. So, if you don't remember, Volume 1 of the New 52 run of Green Lantern, which was written by Geoff Johns, followed Sinestro as he assumed the mantle of Green Lantern yet again, and then basically recruited Hal Jordan to help him alleviate or release his home world from the Yellow Lanterns that you'll remember if you read any previous Green Lantern books that Sinestro essentially got started. Also, we need to talk a little bit again about lanterns and colors because, well, it's kind of important. If you don't know just the general mythos of Green Lanterns, the general premise is that they're a group of beings known as Guardians who have created basically magic rings that harness light into power and energy. By wearing a Green Lantern ring, you represent the notion or the emotion or really kind of the state of being of will. And there's many different colors in the Green Lantern universe. Green is for will, yellow is for fear, red is for rage, orange, which, fun fact, there is only one Orange Lantern in the universe. My favorite character in the DC universe, Larfleeze, but that's for another video. Orange represents sort of avarice or greed, and black represents death. That last one's really going to become important, but there's also another one that really needs to be mentioned, and that is indigo, which sounds like blue, which technically speaking, it's a shade of blue, but nevertheless, indigo kind of indicates sort of like peace, kind of forgiveness, and that's going to be really important because near the opening of this book, the general plot line is Sinestro returns to Earth after relieving Hal Jordan of his Green Lantern ring and goes, "I need your help," which is exactly where the book picks up. Now, I realize normally my structure here with these videos is kind of give a little bit of background about the character or the history of the character. But again, I've only recently sort of gotten into the Green Lantern universe. Again, when I sort of rediscovered comics in my early 20s, I predominantly read the Batman run by Scott Snyder, the Swamp Thing run by Scott Snyder, the Justice League, also written by Geoff Johns, and then there were a couple of Grant Morrison books that I had to pick up, and then, of course, the Wonder Woman tab. So there's a lot of aspects about the Green Lantern universe and mythos that even I'm still learning. So if you want sort of like a long history lesson behind Green Lantern, I don't have it. I can't offer it to you. I'll do my very best to find something and put it in the description section. No promises there because sometimes it's hard to find good or at the very least non-obnoxious comic book videos on YouTube. But anyway, I will try my best. But in terms of this book here, it's important as well to remember that the format of this book is a bound collection of individual comics. You'll note this book here, which I actually just bought less than an hour ago at my local comic book shop, is a single individual Green Lantern comic book. This is one of 6 comic books that have been put out. Far Sector has been widely not criticized, but heralded as an excellent new addition to the Green Lantern universe, and literally every person I've asked about it has said, you need to read Far Sector. And I may or may not be on a podcast a friend of mine puts on to talk about this particular comic, but more of that to come. For the time being, it's important to recognize that Green Lantern Volume 2, The Revenge of Black Hand, is a bound collection of individual issues. That's what a trade is. So moving forward in this review, before I get into what is the plot about and how does this book contribute to the form, if it does at all, it's important to recognize that this book is a collection of issues, specifically Green Lantern 7 through 12. So technically speaking, you can go and pick up the individual Green Lantern comic books 7 through 12, and you'll have essentially what this book is. So if you can't find a trade of this one, just go to your comic book shop, check out the singles section. You might be able to collect your whole run, or, more interestingly enough, you can start collecting comic books. fun facts. But with that in hand, recognize going forward to this video, we're talking about a collection, not an independent graphic novel that's designed to work on its own. There's going to be elements of this book that will fall back upon previous Green Lantern stories in the first 6 issues of Green Lantern, as well as some previous Green Lantern stories that had taken place even as far back as the 90s. That's one of the interesting things about trades versus individual comic books, is that when we're looking at these bound trades, we have to remember this isn't an independent book. It's a book, but it's designed to be a continuation of other narratives and stories. But speaking of story, we should probably get to what this book is actually about. Alright, we're back. So, where are we now? We're discussing generally what Green Lantern Volume 2 Revenge of Black Hand is about, just in terms of the plot. Now again, as I noted before, this is actually a collection of Green Lantern issues 7 through 12 of the New 52 run. So right off the bat, if you haven't read Volume 1, The Return of Sinestro, there's going to be a couple of plot points that you won't necessarily get. So I'd recommend to go back and read it, 1, to understand what's going on in this book, but then also 2, that's also just a really fun book as well. Now, the general arc of this book is Sinestro returning to planet Earth to recruit Hal Jordan to becoming a Green Lantern again. The book literally opens up with Sinestro standing in Hal Jordan's bedroom going, "I need your help." What follows next is a small altercation between the pair of them, which I'll talk a little bit more about when I actually do like the panel-by-panel analysis of it. But eventually, during this fight, Sinestro and Hal Jordan are interrupted by the Indigo Lanterns. Now again, I mentioned earlier like the different emotional spectrum of Green Lanterns. This is important. Indigo Lanterns typically find the individual users who have performed just hideous, atrocious acts. The color indigo is designed to sort of placate the person's hostilities, their individual willpower, and more importantly, their violent action, and try to come to some manner of emotional peace. You could get into a really interesting idea here about how like the indigo light could essentially be sort of similar to antidepressants or just any form of medication designed to sort of affect the neural pathways, but that's its own book, probably. What's important is that Sinestro is captured by the Indigo Lanterns, because if you don't know anything about Sinestro, he's kind of a bad guy. That's the shortened version of that. If you want more details, see basically all of the Green Lantern universe. But Sinestro has done horrible things, as opposed to things, throughout the history of the Green Lantern comic book. And so because of that, the Indigo Lanterns are attracted to him, capture him, and so Hal Jordan has to go and try to get Sinestro back. He discovers that along with Sinestro, the Indigo Lanterns have also taken control of a certain individual by the name of Black Hand. Now, his name is actually William Hand, and again, you kind of had to see that one coming given the fact that it's right there in the title. Now, who is William Hand? William Hand is a major villain in the DC Universe, predominantly because he was the central figure in a massive event in the DC Universe known as Blackest Night. This book came out several years ago. Of course, I didn't stop to take a look at it. I believe it was late 90s, early 2000s. And the general premise is that Black Hand wields a black ring which is associated with death, which gives him basically the ability to manipulate dead bodies. So the general premise is Black Hand summons an army of the dead to basically try to just kill everything in the universe. That gets into the whole, he's kind of being played by this big bad guy, and then Lex Luthor gets a bunch of rings and stuff. It's a wild ride. It was a massive event. It affected every part of the DC universe. Even if you don't go to all the trouble to read all of the other issues, I would definitely recommend to check out Black Hand, because if nothing else, Larfleeze is in the same space as Atrocitus, Sinestro, Hal Jordan. It's great. Like, I'm trying so hard not to geek out about how much this book is and how fun it is. But anyway, the significance of Black Hand making an appearance is important because as Hal attempts to free Sinestro from the Indigo Lanterns, he encounters the original Indigo Lantern, who actually destroys the central power of the Indigo Lantern's light source. Now again, when it comes to lanterns, they basically have their lantern, which is the source of their light. Their rings have to be recharged on a regular basis. The original Indigo Lantern becomes basically just disillusioned with what's happened to his power, his energy, and so he destroys it, thus releasing all of the Indigo Lanterns from their frame of mind. This is a problem because every Indigo Lantern under the control of a ring is a murderer, or a psychopath, or a genocidal tyrant. So basically, if you picture, how you say, a giant prison filled with all the worst human beings in the world stuck on a tiny little planet, and then Hal Jordan and Sinestro are there with almost no power left in their rings. Things get fun. But alongside that story is Black Hand eventually killing himself, acquiring a black ring again, going back to planet Earth, resurrecting his dead family from the grave and having dinner with them. Yeah, no, that's a thing, and I am going to show it to you because it's arguably one of the most chilling passages in this book. And basically coming up with a plan to destroy absolutely everything and everyone. Alongside all of this, there is also another sort of slowly building storyline in which the Guardians of the Universe, aka the original crafters of the Green Lantern rings, find themselves on a quest, or really, more likely, a lunatic quest, in order to free a figure which is known as the Original Lantern. This is a being that the reader up to this point probably won't have a lot of experience with, and I don't even have experience with it. I haven't even started volume 3 of this book yet, and I'm still really pumped to. But the Original Lantern effectively is a figure responsible for all of the light energy in the universe. The Guardians have figured that the Green Lantern project has failed. The universe is still a realm of chaos, uncertainty, and pain, and so they have elected to get rid of all the rings in the universe and then effectively create an army using the Original Lantern to effectively just take over everyone in the universe and start off from zero. And the book literally ends with them unleashing the Green Lantern, who then creates the first of the Third Army. That is Green Lantern 7 through 12. And if that doesn't sound like a roller coaster ride or just a whoa, what the flip, I don't know what does. Again, this is a superhero comic book, and more importantly, it's a superhero comic book created by Geoff Johns. Geoff Johns has been in the comic book game for years. He loves Green Lantern, he loves superheroes, he's a major player in the DC production company. He's responsible for a great number of DC movies. Just anything related to DC, Geoff Johns is it. So anytime you read any book by him, even if it's not a work of just sheer absolute brilliance, you're still going to enjoy every second of the book. Because Geoff Johns loves comics, he loves superheroes, and he wants you to enjoy them as well. So in terms of the story aspect, this book is a blast, just from beginning to end. And so if you're looking just for something fun to read, Green Lantern Volume 2 is definitely up your alley. Now we get to the fun part, and the stuff that I feel like I can contribute the most to, which is, does this book, or does this collection of issues, do anything for the genre of comics? I think so. But let's get into some of the individual pages to really see what this book is doing. Alright, so we're back. We've covered what Volume 2, The Revenge of Black Hand, is about. The question now becomes is, this is a superhero book. Does that mean it's going to offer much for the medium of comics in terms of the way the book is constructed? I'm going to be honest, there's not a lot of dynamic play in this book because, again, as my 7-minute description of the plot hopefully got into, this book is very action-driven. It's a superhero book that's predominantly driven by action and events and characters doing things. So the reader of this book is really far more, or probably going to be more interested in watching the events transpire than seeing how the artist, which, again, this is going to be Doug Mahnke and Ethan Van Sciver. Sciver, I believe the color. Let's see. Geoff Johns. Sciver was also a penciler. And then, oh God, there's a whole list. You know what? I'm going to make sure everybody gets their dues. So take a moment, pause this screen right here so that you can see all the amazing, wonderful people who contributed to this book. And actually, I really need to start doing this more in these videos. Okay? Have you paused it? Great. To all these individual people, if you're watching this, thank you so much. This is one of the most beautiful books on my shelf, and I treasure it. Now, in terms of the actual construction of the book, I noted in the volume 1 that a lot of times this book is going to be very action-oriented. There's going to be a lot of sort of like big, bold panel layouts that are going to take up a lot of space. You're not going to get too much play with panel design and panel layouts. And to be fair, maybe that's selling the book short. You can see in just these 2 pages right here that, again, we're not getting a basic grid structure and watching characters interact in that grid. There's a lot of dynamism, or sort of just dynamic layouts in following the characters through the story. We're not getting moment by moment, it's very much action to action. So you're watching Hal Jordan here, maybe in one moment to moment, but then you're getting action to action sequences moving from sort of an image of Sinestro holding a gun to this gorgeous 2-page spread of Sinestro getting punched in the face. Again, the 2-panel layout is really present in this book and is probably going to become very prevalent in Volume 3. Again, I can't say that for sure since I haven't read it, but I know from reputation that Volume 3 is an epic. Likewise, Hal Jordan, or excuse me, Geoff Johns, well, is there really much of a difference? Hal Jordan is able to shine a lot in this, and we're able to see a lot of real energy and flow taking place in these pages. And so we're able to see that while there's a great number of large, almost full-page panels taking place, there's still a lot of attention played into the layout to sort of create this real sense of energy to the book, this real sense of play. And then again, we also have to take into consideration the rhetorical effect. The appearance here of Black Hand, it's not his first appearance. His actual first appearance was near the start of this book during one of the pages I showed earlier. We see him right here with all the other Indigo Lanterns, but here we really get the recognition of who he is. Now this is partly Geoff Johns kind of like, I suspect, probably like rubbing his shoulder a little bit and going, if you haven't read Blackest Night, you might want to pick up a copy. It's pretty great. I wrote it. But nevertheless, looking at just the layout of this panel here, this is a really unique and really solid rhetorical effect. The reader is clearly supposed to go, oh, Black Hand, no way, he's still alive, he's still here, and he's not a bad guy? What is this? Nevertheless, I'm starting to say nevertheless far too often. Part of the structure of a lot of these layouts is going to be very dramatic, making the reader go, whoa, it's him! Or, hey, do you remember him? Or, hey, do you remember him? Or, whoa, that scene, oh, it's so cool. There's definitely that effect taking place. But at the same time, I do believe a lot of these layouts are as much about demonstrating action as they are about really sort of playing with the medium. Again, if you look at a lot of comics from this time period, most of them are going to be like whole page to page. If there is sort of like any sort of closed panel spaces, they'll usually be blacked out near the edges. Like you're never going to see a white-edged comic book after the year 2000. Well, actually, let's just make it 2010 just to be safe. Whatever the case, there's still a lot to be said for a lot of the emotional impact of these layouts as well. Because on the one hand, while there's sometimes a nostalgia effect, or whether sometimes an action effect, there is some very interesting thematic choices in terms of the layout as well. Again, I pointed out this page here because this made me stop reading for a minute. Black Hand, I knew, was a very, how you say, disturbed individual, but hopefully you've paused it and read this 2-page sequence already. But you can tell already, this is messed up. He literally brought his family back from the grave, and he's having a conversation with his dead family, and he has one of the most chilling monologues here when he says, "No, I'm going to do what I want now that I'm home. I'm going to murder as many people as I can in as many ways as I can, and then I'm going to raise them from the ground, and they're going to do the same thing. I won't be the outcast anymore, Father. Everyone will be like me, and the world can be one happy family." What the flip, man? Okay, so that's clearly meant to sort of kind of shock the reader a little bit, or really just set up just dramatic affair that is the event of Black Hand and make you think back to Darkest Night. But looking at the layout of this, we have a really interesting sort of perspective. The eye focuses sort of a lot from whether or not, or here we see just the top of the table, we see far away the family, we get a close-up of the father and mother, we get a close-up of Black Hand's face, just his mouth, and then we have this panel here. A lot of times these half panel pages or full panel pages are really designed to make the reader just stop and look at the awesome, fist going into somebody's face. But this purposely consumes a half page, I would argue, for the emotional effect of recognizing how disturbed Black Hand is as an individual. This is an effect where panel layout is being used and employed not simply to present action, but in fact actually to present character and to create a tone of the work itself. That's a good, solid creative choice in terms of the comic's layout. And I would argue at that moment then, it really begs the question of, is it fair to say that because it's a superhero book, it doesn't offer anything to the medium of comics? To which I say, no. No, there's a lot of good creative choices here. Another really interesting one is when Sinestro opens the Book of the Black, and we get this gorgeous 2-page spread. Now, it's important to recognize that each one of these long horizontal images right here constitute its own individual panel, which then eventually bleeds over into this panel here, where we see a figure who's going to become very, very important in the Green Lantern universe. Nevertheless, this large 2-page spread, on the one hand, is designed to create sort of an action sequence, or just a moment of like, whoa, but it's also a really beautiful way of arranging the images on the page for a solid, just aesthetic effect. We have to really remember and really process the idea that the key to the Green Lantern comic books is the light, is the energy, is the emotion. This is a cosmic book, meaning it's going to take place in space. We're going to have aliens, we're going to encounter the supernatural, we're going to encounter science fiction, and so what's really at play here is a lot of play. There's a lot of really careful attention dedicated to the arrangement of panels, but then also as well to the color that the reader experiences. Not simply for brand recognition, we need color green to be with Green Lanterns, yellow with Yellow Lanterns. It's also an attempt to really sort of explore color and the way color can have an effect on us. Again, if you stare at my shirt for 5 minutes, first off, you're going to go, does he really think he can pull off that top? To which I go, you bitch. Second, if you look at my top for an extended period of time, you'll observe the effect of the green and black stripes. If this was just a solid green shirt, it would have a different visual impact upon you, the viewer. You'll also observe as well the way my green shirt will sort of react very strongly in terms of your eye reaction. Eye reaction? That's a word now. I have a master's degree. Your eyes will react to the combination of the green and red, the green of my shirt and the red of the American flag. Likewise, when it comes to Green Lanterns, we have to understand that color is being employed for a particular effect. Colorists in the Green Lantern universe have to pay very careful, very special attention to the way it's going to have an effect upon the viewer. Case in point, when we finally see the original Lantern, you'll note just how many colors are actually taking place. You will see bits of yellow, bits of blue, bits of red, bits of purple, bits of indigo, what have you, because the original Lantern is effectively white. And if you don't know anything about the color spectrum, it's important to remember, white is not a color. Chemically and physically speaking, white is every color. It's only when you look at something that just about every other color except for the color you recognize is being absorbed. So, if you look at this letter G here, light, white light is striking the page and then reverberating into your eye, and then what's happening is the structures in your eye are filtering out everything except for the color green. That's important, because when we're talking about the original Lantern, he is white, so he's well, kind of. He's essentially going to be every color. So, in effect, he is essentially white. But what's important there is that we're using an aspect of real scientific theory and principle to create an aesthetic effect in the viewer who's really just here to watch cool aliens fight in space. I would argue visually, Green Lantern Volume 2, The Revenge of Black Hand, does offer a lot to the reader who's interested in the way of arranging panels on the page for aesthetic effect. Granted, the aesthetic effect of this book is predominantly to make you go, oh, cool, Hal Jordan is awesome, and Sinestro's a good guy again, kind of. And there's all sorts of battles in space and stuff. But at the same time, it's important to sort of observe how Geoff Johns and all the wonderful people who contributed to this book are really employing color in these panel layouts for a particular effect. Nostalgia is definitely part of it, but one of the really interesting parts about the Green Lantern universe for me is the notion of color being a principle not only of behavior but also psychology and the way you make choices and live your life. Okay, I think I've got a good ending there. Thank you so much, as always, for watching. I really appreciate it. If you liked this, please remember, like, share, and subscribe. All that jazz. It helps me. It helps you. Feel free to make comments in the comment section below. If you love Green Lantern as much as I do, please leave a comment. Tell me what your favorite Green Lantern story is. If you're looking for a copy of Green Lantern Volume 2, or if you're looking for issues 7 through 12, as always, check out your local comic book shop. That's where I got this one. A lot of the new 52 trades are still available. A couple of them have gone out of print, namely the Larfleeze stuff. Sad for me. Whatever. The point is that you can get it at your local comic book shop, or you can probably just collect issues 7 through 12. Most comic book shops, almost all comic book shops, will have a singles rack that you can just sort of sift through and build a collection. If you do not have a local comic book shop, but have a local library, see if they have it. Because again, more and more libraries are adding comics to their repertoire, and then if they don't have it, try an interlibrary loan. You never know. You might get lucky. As always, thank you again for watching. I really appreciate it. Go read some comics.